So we're building the Beis Hamikdash. We're building the Mishkan. Piece by piece, it's all coming together in the Parsha. The theme, the point that stands out is that the best of the best should be devoted to godliness in everything. You find the best, the nicest, the most pleasant, the most enjoyable, and you give it to godliness. Like somebody said once, a mashpia said to a bacher, why is it that when you were bad, you were happy? Now that you became good, now that you did tshuva, now all of a sudden you're so serious and you're so somber. Not fair. Why should the Aveda get all the simcha and God doesn't get any? It's a beautiful message. The best of everything. Your greatest joys, your greatest happiness, your greatest pleasures should all be part of your Yiddishkeit, not left out. So that's what the idea of bringing the first fruits and bringing the first of the sheep, a tenth of the sheep or whatever, the meiser. It's all when you have something exciting, when you have something impressive, when you have something unusual, you want to immediately engage it in the godliness of your life. I guess that's one of the symptoms of love. If you love someone, at every occasion, you look forward to sharing good news, happy news, pleasant news. So if you have good news in your crops, or you have good news in your vineyards, or you have good news in your fields, you want to share that with God himself, particularly since you owe it to him. So in how many different ways can we channel positive energy, positive experiences, the best of the best? How do we channel it into godliness? Well, practically speaking, whenever something good happens, whenever you have good news, the first thought should be, how do I tell the Rebbe the good news? Because God forbid, when something is difficult or frightening, our first thought is to go to the Rebbe, which is correct. When you need help from above, that's where you go. But why not the good stuff? A number of times the Rebbe complained. People come to me when they're in trouble. They never let me know when the troubles are over, the good news. So if something good is happening, you decided that you're going to learn something special, you were inspired, you're going to take on another minhag or another mitzvah or another, why don't you tell the Rebbe? He'd be so thrilled to hear it. That's called truma. You elevate the best stuff. It's good already. You elevate it to godliness, turning good into godly. That's basically the theme. The theme of the Mishkan is there are a lot of good things in this world. There's gold, there's silver, there's copper, there's fine wool, there's great wood. That's good. Our job is to take what is good and make it godly. And this is so much more elegant, so much more dignified than the attitude or the assumption that life is all about right and wrong, good and bad, and there's a constant struggle, constant tension between good and bad, between mitzvah and sin. And you're always standing right there in the middle, and the next move you make will either be a mitzvah or it'll be a sin. That's not a comfortable place to be. That's not a very positive picture of life. That life is simply a contrast or a conflict between acceptable and unacceptable. It's heaven or hell, nothing in between. Alter Rebbe says that's not true. It's not the way to think about things. It's not like you're tempted to sin and you're tempted to be good. Which one is going to win? Of course, the goodness is going to win. What's the question? The fact that we sometimes sin? So what? That's not competition to the good. Sin is a temporary insanity. That's not our problem. Our problem is not sin. At least it doesn't have to be. The issue is there's a lot of good in the world. How do we make it godly? There's a challenge. There's the constant decision making. Life is good. I'm involved with good things. I have a lot of good things. How do I make it godly? So much more elegant, so much more respectable, so much more dignified. And that's the difference between seeing the world divided into Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov, or seeing the world divided into ordinary good versus absolute divinity, godliness. I don't know if we've spoken about this in this particular forum. One of the conflicts that people get hung up on, get trapped in, and often end up making poor choices is the conflict between the reality of creation or the reality of the creator. The perspective that we have that comes from experiencing life in this world and the perspective we get from Torah, seeing the world through the eyes of the creator. And I think I mentioned previously how interesting it would be if we would reword the entire Torah into first person. Instead of God saying, God spoke to Moshe, if we were, I spoke to Moshe. And I said to him, and Moshe said to me, make it first person, right? As if it were God's personal diary. That would be fascinating. Same story, same event, same words. But it would bring out, it would make it so clear that we're talking about God's personal diary. What does the world look like to him? Like the flood. The generations immediately after the flood began to doubt the divine purpose or the divine involvement that caused the flood. They started to think that maybe the world, nature, the planet is just governed by certain rules and certain laws that dictate that every 1,000 years or so, there's going to be a flood. The dry land cannot contain the oceans. The heavens cannot contain all the moisture that is there. And things build up, and after 1,000 years, it's all going to come crashing down. And there's going to be a flood every 1,000 years. And I'm sure they had scientific evidence and scientific theory, and they could prove it, and they could argue it, and they could debate it. I know they weren't blaming the flood on aerosol cans, but I'm sure they had their theories back then. And that's why they built the Tower of Babel, to solidify the heavens, to get out of Earth's atmosphere. They did not trust Earth because they thought that the flood was a natural phenomenon. And that lack of faith, God was not thrilled with, so he changed their languages and he disrupted the construction of the tower. The Torah comes along and in God's voice says, I created the world. People went experimenting to find out what life is all about. They corrupted themselves. They were horrible. They were terrible. And I had to start all over again. So I picked Noach because he was a good guy. And I rebuilt the entire human population from him. with all the details that we know about from the Medrash and from the Gemara. But if you put it in that first person tone, it eliminates the danger or the possibility that a generation or two later, we're going to start attributing stuff to nature. People do this all the time. The food that fell from heaven that the Jews ate in the desert for 40 years, it's a natural thing. It was something that can be explained according to nature, and it wasn't really food, it was just something. If God would say, for 40 years I gave you breakfast every morning, just for that day, and then the next day I gave it to you again, maybe it wouldn't be so easy to get distracted. So that would be really fascinating. Seeing the story of the world from the Creator's perspective. So what would be the difference? You might say that realists, people who are realistic, look at the laws of nature and they say, look, you can't fool Mother Nature. So if you know what the rules of nature or the laws of nature are, well, you've got to respect it. Because this is real. If you don't take them seriously, you're out of touch with reality. So be real and recognize what you need to do by the demands of nature. Even things like, how are you going to get a job if you don't have a degree? How are you going to be able to support your family if you don't go to college? Sounds like a good argument. Realistic? Yes. But there's a reality that is factual. And we get a little tripped up by that word. When we want to describe something that is absolutely, undeniably, necessarily true, we call it fact. Hey, look at the facts. It's a fact. Can't argue with facts. It's not necessarily a good definition of fact. Fact is not absolute true. Fact is real, no question. But absolute true? No, because facts change. Ancient science versus modern science, they have almost nothing in common. Facts changed. Because facts are changeable. Facts are the condition on the ground as it happens to be. It happens to be that most people are greedy, selfish, petty, cruel. That happens to be. Is it also true that most people are essentially good? Can both be real? Are people essentially good, or are people factually bad? Yes, they can both be real. Circumstances make people greedy. Circumstances make people petty. Circumstances make people cruel. So there is cruelty and there's jealousy and so on. Is it real? Oh yeah, it's real. It's real. But is it unavoidable? Is it inevitable, ineluctable? It has to be this way? No, it doesn't have to be this way. Can we change it? Maybe not. That still doesn't mean that it has to be this way. So even if it's out of control of the human being, it doesn't mean that it has to be this way. So if someday it changes, no surprise, no miracle there. So if someday people are actually good, not petty, not jealous, not cruel, would that be a miracle? It wouldn't be a miracle. There's no law in the world that says people have to be cruel. There is a fact that for a long, long time, many people all over the world are cruel. When we say Torah is true with a capital T, what do we mean by that? And again, this is what people get so confused. Oh, the Torah is true? Come on, so many people don't agree with that. If so many people don't agree with that, can it still be true? Sadly, Yes. You can know something that is absolutely true, and yet nobody bothers to do it. Nobody agrees with it. Nobody cares about it. It's a completely neglected, uninteresting subject. Is it the truth? Yes, it is the truth. So why doesn't everybody know it? Why doesn't everybody do it? Why doesn't everybody agree that this is the truth? See, that's the difference. Perspective. Are you looking at the world from God's eyes, or are you looking at the world from the world's eyes? If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. I want to invite you to join us as VIPs, partners in our work, and join us also for a personal chat with other members of the VIP club. We talk about many things. There's an opportunity to ask, to respond, to make a comment, to meet the other supporters. And together we can really make a difference in Jewish life and in life in general. So join us. It's goodtoknow.org. Log in, call, make contact, and join us with the VIPs.